Hello and welcome to Relatable Code. In this video, we are going to talk about visibility modifiers in Kotlin. So let's get started. Now, before talking about visibility modifiers and what they are, I'm going to show you why we need them. Okay? Remember in the previous video when we were talking about classes and we made this book class, we were trying to access this title and modify it as a property inside the book class. And we could do that by using book.title, and we were able to modify it in several ways. One way was to write book.title equals, for example, empty string, and another way was to create a function inside the class. Okay, we created a function called setNewTitle, and that just changed the value of title to whatever we passed to this function as a parameter. Okay, which reflected here. So our book was created and a title was assigned to this book using the setNewTitle method. Okay, and that's great. But the reason why we used the setNewTitle method was just to control access to the title variable of the book so that we couldn't access it however we want in our code. And the reason for that is we kind of need to track where we use this title if we are trying to read it or to modify it. So if we're trying to get this title or to modify it using a set new title. And we can get it like this. We can write a function, for example, get new title, and we could just return title. Okay. Now title is a string, so this function should return a string. And we could use this get new title method here by writing book.getNewTitle, and that's just it. Okay, so we can replace this book.title method with the getNewTitle, and we can run our application again. And that should be it. Okay, that's it. What's printed to the output window is book.getNewTitle. GetNewTitle returns the current title of the book, which was modified using the setNewTitle. Okay, but the reason why we created these two methods is so that we can't access this title directly in our code like book.title or book.title equals empty string, for example, changing its value. Because like that, if we have some error in our code related to this title, we would have to control left click on this title and visit every single instance where we are trying to access or modify it, which is why we need to separate the accessing of this title and its modification. Okay, and that's what we did here with the get new title and the set new title. But as you can see in my code, I could still access this title inside my main method. Okay, I'm not obligated to use the get new title and set new title yet, but now I will be. Okay, because we need that functionality here. And the way I can do that is by declaring that the title variable inside my book class is private. And I can do that like this. So if I write private var title equals default title, as you can see, we can no longer access this title outside the scope of this class, okay, which is this much. So I can only access this title now inside this scope so far. Okay, I can access it inside get new title here and inside set new title as well, but I can't access it anymore outside the class, such as in the main method. So if I hover over the title, I get an error message, cannot access title, it is private in book. Okay, and that's what we want. We want to have this separation so that we can make it easier to see where we're getting this title and where we are modifying this title. Okay, so if I control left click on get new title, I just get the instances where I'm trying to get the value of this title. And if I control left click over set new title as well, I can see the usages of set new title only. Okay. Now I'm going to give you a valid use case for where you can really benefit from the private variables. Okay, where you don't want to expose these variables to outside the class. Suppose my book has a certain price. Okay, so let's create a variable and name it base price, like this. And let's give it an initial value of, for example, 10.0. Okay, so the base price is a double. Okay, and suppose the book also has a, for example, fees that you have to pay when you want to buy this book. You can represent them like this. Var fees equal base price times, for example, 0.11. Okay, consider these as fees or taxes if you want. And you have a third variable for total price, for example. So you can write var total price equals base price plus fees. Okay, and that's great. But when you want to use this book in your code, you may not want to expose the base price and the fees variables. You just want to know its total price. Okay, because you don't want the ability to modify its base price or the fees, for example. You need to have these be accessible just inside the book itself. And you can do that by declaring them as private, like this. You can write private var base price, and you can write private var fees. Okay, now I can't access these attributes outside the context of my class. Okay, book.base price and book.fees are not accessible outside the class of book. Okay. Now, what if I want to have a public getter for my title, but I want it to only be able to be set privately inside this class? I can do that in more than one way. So here we have a public getter and a public setter for this title. That's what these methods are called, getters and setters. Okay. I want this to be public, and most of my use cases, that's what happens usually. And the set to be private, just inside this class. Okay, I don't want the ability to modify it outside the context of my book class, but I want to be able to get it anywhere I want in my code. I can do that by declaring my set new title method as private, but there's another way. Now you can see that we have an error here because we can't access it anymore because it's private inside the context of my class. But there's another way we can do that. If I don't want to create a new method for set new title, and I just want its getter to be public, I can do something like, for example, I can modify this title variable here. Let's remove the private modifier. But now I can access it and modify it outside my class, which I don't want. I just want to be able to access it in my main method. So I can write var title equal default title, and underneath it, I can write private set. Okay. Now what happens? I can access uh, book.title outside the scope of my class, like this, but I can't modify book.title. If I try to write book.title equals, for example, any string, I can't do that anymore because the setter for title is now private in book. Okay. That provides a very concise way of writing getters and setters for your variables. You don't need this if you just write private var title equals default title, because if the variable is private, by default, its getter and setter are both private by default, okay? You would need this notation like that if you have a variable like what I showed you that has a public getter and a private setter, okay? And that was visibility modifiers in Kotlin. And not just that, in this video you learned about encapsulation in programming. And what I mean by that is you learned how to bundle or group the methods and variables related to a single object or reference in your code, in our case, this class. You learned how to group them all together inside this class, and you learned how to modify or restrict the access to these variables by using the private keyword. Okay, and that's a very fundamental concept of programming, because you can't just leave every one of your variables as public by default. You know, if you don't write private, they are public by default. You can access them from anywhere you want in your code, which you don't want for many use cases. Maybe you have some fees which you don't want to manipulate outside the scope of this book, the base price, and lots of other use cases that we will, of course, cover in the future. Okay? You need to know this concept and you need to apply it to your code as well, so that you can have this encapsulation and it can make your code very good and robust. Okay? Total price is also a good example for using encapsulation because you don't want to modify this total price outside the scope of this book. So you can write private set after declaring this total price, and now you can't modify it in your code. You can just get it or access it. Okay, so you can write book dot total price like that, but you can't really assign it a new value because it has a private setter in your class book. Okay. If you like these type of videos, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for future content, and I'll see you in the next video.